was so admirant. I found him to just be very, very interesting, and his talk was very interesting. And I just asked him if he would come because our theme is your personal growth and development. And he had a wonderful presentation. Is there anything else you'd like me to say? Because
I think that is great.
all right, super.
Well, thank you, everyone, and also for my own accountability, I'm putting a little timer on. Right? But thank you, and I was really honored when Anne came and asked me to be able to present today. So especially when she came after the presentation I did on cultural competencies and said that there was something that she saw in me that she thought would be great for this group. And so I'm very honored to be here. One thing I'll be pretty transparent about, and I'll get into my introduction a bit. So I'm a bit of an anxious person sometimes, and something that I did to kind of bring a little joy for people, but also to help me out a bit because it's a bit sneaky, is I went ahead and handed people those little box breathing toys. And yeah, there we go, absolutely. And for here, something that I'd like to do to kind of help myself, but also kind of help us all get in a little bit of sync for this presentation, is I'd like to invite people to go ahead and join me in just a couple of box breaths. And so going ahead and doing 3 of these together. And if people want the basic directions, so the back of all of the boxes, we'll talk about it. But we will inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. And do that for 3 breaths. Now, I'm going to keep a basic count up here, but different people breathe at different rates, and so what feels right for you and feels comfortable for you should be the pace that you keep. Right? And inviting people to kind of running your finger along the edge and that physical tactile sensation, which can also be very calming for us. Without further ado then, inhale, hold, exhale, hold. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold. Last breath in, hold, out, hold. Thank you. Now, in my presentation today, I'm going to be talking about strategies that I found for myself and in working with other people that really helped me to be able to live the life that I want to live. I was very happy to find out about this group, and it sounds like many of you come here because you're already prioritizing setting aside time to ask some of the big questions about what do you believe, what is the meaning and purpose that you find in your life, what are the ways that we seek that. And we get a lot of intentions that we have in what we want to do with our lives, the way we want to approach, the way that we interact with other people, and the way we just live our day-to-day. But oftentimes there's a lot of things that can get in the way of us living whatever we've decided our life should be. And so I figure a good way to talk to people with a lot of diversity of spiritual beliefs and people who have probably come to a lot of really strong conclusions for your own personal life, that a good idea to talk about might be some of the strategies we can have that regardless of the purpose and regardless of the mission that you see for yourself, what are some of the things we can do to really practice what we preach and live a life that's in line with that? Now, here, this is where it works. All right. So, basic introduction for me, because I think that if I'm going to spend time talking about spirituality, things like perspectives, that I kind of owe it to everybody to let you know what's my perspective and kind of where I'm coming from. So, there's the name, Nicholai Hoefferle. I'll be honest though, if I ever hear myself called by my full legal name, it immediately makes me feel like I'm in trouble. All right? So, Nick is absolutely fine. Right? Now, I start out by saying that I'm the son of Terry Hoefferle and Ginger Bain. And not only because there might be some people here who have known them, they've lived and worked in Alaska throughout their whole lives, but also because the second part there is that I grew up in Dillingham, Alaska, so rural community in Bush, Alaska, and it's a predominantly Yupik community that I was raised in. And in that culture, knowing your family, knowing your people, and those connections is a really deep part of who we are. In fact, like, even though I'm a grown man with hearing aids and gray in my beard, if I go back to Dillingham, I'm Ginger's boy, I'm Terry's son, right? Now, from here, next, so I'm a veteran of the United States Navy, so served with Assault Craft Unit 2 from 2004 to 2008. Doing bulk ship to shore and anti-piracy operations, which gives me the fun distinction of being able to legitimately say I was a pirate hunter, right? So sounds a little cooler than it was, but it's still nice to have, right? And one I didn't have on here because this is a standard intro slide I have, but something pertinent to a lot of my worldview and how I see things is that while being raised in Dillingham, I was raised in and around the Domestic Violence Sexual Assault Victims Advocacy Shelter out there, so SAFE if anybody's familiar with it. And because of my experiences growing up there, it very much shaped a lot of the ways that I believe that people should act and our personal responsibilities to ourselves and the people around us. Now, from my time in the service, I did a very hard U-turn. I ended up getting out of the military, going to college for English education and dance. That is a long story, but yes, classically trained dancer. And while I was doing that, I started teaching preschool. So yeah, I had that very big culture shift of going from like United States Navy to toddlers, right? So managed to navigate that well, and frankly, I learned a tremendous amount my second time through preschool. So many of us have likely had the experience, since I know people in here have likely raised kids. But children teach you a tremendous amount about the way that you approach the world, the way that you can let things go, right? And being able to be there and having to choose appropriate behavior around kids all day, every day, was also a really great exercise on personal discipline. Because toddlers might be the size of football, but punting them is illegal, right? And so learning to maybe breathe through that and choose my actions in the moment. Now, from preschool, so I was raised Catholic out in Dillingham, so Father Kelly was my priest through a lot of my life growing up, and I greatly appreciated that. But my very first introduction working in preschool was actually the Child Development Center of Congregation Beth Shalom here in town, and had wonderful conversations and stuff with the rabbi there, and being the Catholic working at a Jewish preschool. All right, I can also do a few of the prayers in Hebrew still, and so not as useful now that I'm not in the preschool, but it was a really great opportunity. And especially being able to see different approaches to some of the same texts, since there's an overlap in Catholicism and Judaism when it comes to the Old Testament, and just seeing the different practices and interpretations, even with some of the same source material, was really, it was a good experience for me to see. Then, when I got done working at the Congregation Beth Shalom, I worked at a different preschool for a few more years as a lead teacher. Just toddlers were my real wheelhouse. And then from there, I made a transition into working with an agency that supports people who experience intellectual and developmental disabilities. And so I have the great privilege of being one of the primary people whose job it is to help train direct support professionals to support individuals to live meaningful lives of their own choosing in their community. Now that can look really different for different people, and since everybody's life is different, it has to be very individualized. But being able to have people learn some of those skills and strategies to support people where they're at has been what I've spent the last about decade of my professional career working on. And outside of my professional career, I'm also very active with the National Alliance on Mental Illness, so NAMI. Now, big disclaimer for it is that I'm a veteran with complex PTSD, and so I'm affiliated with NAMI because I myself am a person who struggles with mental illness. And I kind of found my tribe in NAMI as a grassroots organization of people who have those shared experiences, who work with and support one another where we're at to try to be successful. And it was really powerful for me being involved, and over the years I've kind of moved up to where I'm currently the vice president of the NAMI Alaska board. I'm one of the peer-to-peer facilitators for NAMI Anchorage, so I actually facilitate the support and educational groups. And I have the privilege of being Alaska's representative on NAMI's National Service Members, Veterans, and Family Council. So a lot of the philosophy that I have in my life is trying to do the most good that you can where you're at. And so being able to talk about some of these areas and just how I approach my daily life and some of the groups that I work with, I thought would be a way to demonstrate for you guys kind of the mentality that I approach my life with. And from my background and some things that will contribute to my perspective, the next one I'm going to click into. Well, it'll listen to me. There it is. Right? But how do I personally define spirituality? I can give a lot of different things that contribute to individual values and beliefs that I hold. But at its real core for me, spirituality is going to be that sense of meaning and purpose in your life. Some people think of a unifying concept, but that thing that makes you feel connected and makes you want to get out of bed, put real people pants on, and live your life. And oftentimes that meaning and purpose is going to be intimately tied to people's beliefs and values, which they might get from various sources, whether they're the beliefs and values we were raised with, or the ones that we found and we discovered for ourselves throughout our life. Now, then it's also a sense of connection to things that are bigger than and outside of ourselves, whether that is other people, whether that is the divine, whether that is our connections with nature. And I know for some people, you might consider all three of those to be the same thing, right? But that connection to those things bigger than ourselves, that's also tied into that spirituality. Now, for me then, after you have that sense of what your meaning and purpose is, it's one thing to have it, but the real trick to living a good life is to practice what we preach. That after we've taken that time to do the soul searching, get to know ourselves, and develop the ideas of this is the life I want to live, what are those strategies we can have to actually take action? From my definitions of spirituality, just some of this is going to be getting to know some of my language. You can tell from that background I had that I got a background with behavioral health. And so some of this is a little denser and more technical. My apologies, it's how my brain works. But I like to draw a distinction between two kind of types of behavior that people do. And behavior is, again, a thing you do, so not just our thinking. But I like to draw a distinction between responses, intentional choices that people make. Now, all of us are capable of doing it. You stop, you think, you make a decision, and then you do it, right? And responses are what I'm going to focus on throughout a lot of this presentation on trying to bring out in us. The fact that we intentionally chose an action and took it. But there are many things in our lives that can cause us to not have a response, but rather have a reaction, which is just an almost automatic thing that happens from internal and external factors. All right, somebody is talking to you and something they say pushes the insecurity button. All of a sudden we start to feel defensive, and then the way we're responding to people is through that defensiveness instead of listening to people with an open heart. Sometimes we're hungry and we're tired and we're stressed out and we're just over it. And the things that we might want to do with our life to be present and patient with people are just not where we're at in the moment because a lot of these other factors going on with ourselves. And so trying to become aware of what things are just those reactions and what things are the intentional choices we make is going to be a really important part of living a life that has that intention. And I may have to just walk across here and do this each time. But now, and actually, Evan, we were talking beforehand, and you were talking about kind of needing a stop and everything for a break, right? Well, the thing is that this model here, that hand up, very much made me think of that. Now, this is one of those things where physically moving is something that's really helpful for engaging your brain and getting it in. So I'd actually like to invite you guys to join me along with this here. But what we're about to go through is what's called the hand-brain model. Now, citing my sources, this is from Dr. Siegel, and we can see that Jillian Enright is the one who drew up the visual. But if we take our hands and we hold them up here, next to our head, palm facing away from us. Well, I want you to think of your wrist coming up here. This is the spine coming up into the brain stem, and this is going to be our whole brain. This is where we're looking at things that are going to be parts of our cerebellum, hippocampus, and this is really the stuff that is your brain telling your body what This is the taking the breath. This is basic digestion, things we don't really think about. But then if we take our thumb and we fold that thumb here in the middle, this is going to be the limbic parts of our brain. Now, there's a bunch of different structures there, like your amygdala, which can be an angry little peanut that does stimulus and response. And this can be different for people. For me, I had wonderful experiences with dogs growing up. And when I see a dog, I smile and I want to run over and pet it. But for somebody who might have been bit by a dog as a kid, this part of their brain might flag that dogs are dangerous, dogs bite us. And so our life experiences, our perspective, comes through here, and this is that emotional response our brain does. But we're not just emotional creatures. We can think, we can rationalize, we can exhibit that executive function. And that's because our cortex, these fingers here, wrap over that. And that's going to be that wrinkly part of your brain you see when you look at pictures of a brain. And that's the part that we're really aware of when we're making our choices. And in fact, this area right here, because it's like this would be our prefrontal cortex. That's that part that does a lot of that self-regulation, a lot of the conscious brain talking to the emotional brain to talk to the body. But when we get angry, when we get tired, when we get hurt, when we get frustrated, we start to flip our lids. This cortex starts going offline. And instead of being connected, tuned in, empathetic, patient, we lose that. And our brain just starts getting those quick reactions to things that oftentimes are not the behaviors that we would choose for ourselves. I'm sure I'm not the only person who, because I was in a hurry or I was angry or I was stressed and frustrated, I made a decision that I maybe later regretted. So now, with this model in line, what we can do to bring that back on when we find ourselves getting ready to flip our lid can be some strategies that I'll talk about through here. But it's also really important for us to recognize when we're starting to get to that point. Because our brains have all been designed to just go on autopilot and respond. It's a survival thing. A million years ago, if I'm walking through the woods and suddenly a bear starts charging right at me, if I had to stop and go, hey, all right, large animal coming right at me, sharp claws, sharp teeth, seems to be a little on the hungry, and I've seen it eat other things, like maybe it intends me harm, all right, and then I start responding and running, bear's already got me, right? I'm already ate. So our brain had to wire to go bear, fear, run. I'll figure out why I'm afraid later after I'm out of the situation, right? And so there's a reason we're wired to do that. And even if our body is just the vehicle that our spirit takes from point A to point B, knowing how it responds to the different things going on around us allows us to navigate that vehicle intentionally throughout our life. So from our hand-brain model, when we talk about the things that can cause us to flip our lids, stress is something that is ingrained in the human condition, and it is that way for a reason. Stress is something that tells us we need to pay attention to something. When I'm hungry, my body starts feeling hangry. It starts giving me those stress hormones and things because it wants to motivate me to take care of myself and go eat. When I'm tired, I get cranky because it wants me to sleep. But these same drives that we see here are not just the physiological needs of food, water, shelter, sleep, and absence from pain, but we also get into the needs for safety and security. And safety and security can be two very different things for people. Safety is that we're free from the threat of harm physically, emotionally, and psychologically right now in the moment. But security is a feeling and a sensation, right? And the way I like to describe this is any of us who have ever been worried about, am I going to get rent paid on the first? You got a roof over your head today. You got food in your belly today. Today, you are safe. But that concern that in a few weeks, maybe you won't have that covered, where are you going to live, what are you going to do? That concern makes you feel insecure. And even if come the first, you get that bill paid, no harm, no foul. It doesn't negate a lot of the stress and anxiety leading into that, and it doesn't stop you from immediately going, yeah, but what about October's rent? And so that's where I like to draw that distinction, because security really comes from consistency and predictability, while safety is that absence of things that can hurt you. Now then, People need people. I don't know if anybody here has ever heard about the Yupik man who spent his entire life alone, because that guy didn't live very long, right? The reality is that we need each other, even if it's just for when I'm sick, I need somebody who can be there to make sure the wolves don't get me. Human beings are wired to be connected, to need one another on some level. And feeling that people respect you, feel safe with you, all right, that's a deep need people have. So that reaching out for love and belonging, big part of our needs. We then want to know that we have value and meaning in ourselves, independent of just what we can do for other people. What are the things that we're proud of? What are the things that make us feel unique? That's going to be the things that end up contributing to this sense of self-esteem, that sense of value and worth that we each have for ourselves. And when we're able to be in a place where our bodies feel safe, our minds feel restful and calm, we're able to feel connected to people and things around us and have that sense of belonging. When we feel that we have achieved, that we're comfortable in our own skin, those are the points where we can really be able to relax, be ourselves, and actualize the life that we want to live. Now, that self-actualization at the top, it's hard to be there just because of all of the other chaos and stressors and things going on in our lives. But the more intentionally we meet our needs, the less of those natural stressors are going to be happening, and the more likely we are to be in a state where we can approach life intentionally. From our needs, we're going to talk a little bit about breathing exercises. Now, I realized when I was coming in here that actually many people here probably meditated and done some breathing exercises before, right?
Yep.
Show of hands, not a first time. Very nice. Okay, so these will be things a lot of people are familiar with, and maybe some of these tips I'll be giving will be things that you guys have probably discovered in your own practices, right? But something that I've learned working with people through NAMI and through other places with individuals who might need help being able to ground and deal with anxiety in the moment is, unfortunately, a lot of the time people try to learn different self-coping skills. They try to learn them when they're stressed because somebody told them, hey, when you're feeling anxious, take some deep breaths. And that's some good advice, but if the only time you ever stop and take some breaths for yourself is when you're already stressed, step one, people don't learn things very well when they're stressed, so it's hard to learn a new skill that way. Step two, your body and brain are associating that deep breathing with being stressed, which may not be the association we're trying to reinforce. So, pro tips, practice these things consistently over time in situations and places where you feel calm and safe. Whether it's having your morning meditations you do with people, whether it's things that you have maybe practicing while you're standing in line at the bank or going for a walk. But being able to engage these exercises throughout your day in natural ways not only helps your body and brain to remember that state, so when you're doing that breathing under stress, you can come back to it, but also it normalizes it and makes it a thing that you can generalize to all sorts of settings. I meditate at work. I do breathing exercises at work and at home. Same thing in public when I'm there, just with a few minutes standing in line. Because that way I get that ability to bring that calm and bring that presence in wherever I'm needed. Also, as we're going through things for breathing exercises, different exercises feel differently for different people. And I highly encourage people, even though we'll go through a couple of them here, to practice with various forms and strategies of breathing exercises to find the one that really feels right for you. And I also want to leave us with something that I feel kind of profound talking about breathing exercises before popping in here. But it occurred to me that regardless about culture, regardless of background, right, regardless of where people have come from, that when you think about the very first thing that all of us did for ourselves when we were born, I ask that question to people sometimes of what is that first thing we do? And usually the first answer that I get is we cry. And absolutely crying is up there on the list. All right, we reach out, we communicate to others. But before we can cry, before we can even do that for ourselves, we have to take a deep breath. And so the very first thing all of us did for ourselves in our lives, that first act of independence, was taking a breath for ourselves and then crying out to communicate to the people around us. And so that for me is one of the reasons why getting in touch with our breathing and our bodies can have such a profound effect on us feeling connected. So then, first of the breathing exercises I want us to talk about for a second is just going to be diaphragmatic breathing, which an advantage to this is you can kind of add it to any of our breathing practices. Now, quickly, people want to join me, but if you put a hand on your chest and a hand on your stomach, and you take a deep breath, trying to pay attention to which hand moves. Now, I have a habit of being a chest breather. I take shallow breaths up here in my chest, and that's actually been linked with anxiety. But if you're somebody where maybe the bottom hand on your stomach moves more, when the stomach hand is moving more, you're breathing more from your diaphragm. That's expanding and contracting. And breathing from your diaphragm opens up your whole lungs, and those deeper, fuller breaths have been associated with sensations of relaxation and calm. And it can also go ahead and improve oxygen flow. Now, diaphragmatic breaths, along with a few of the other exercises we'll look at, research isn't 100% on why they help us. Some people think it's the regulation of our heart rate and it's things that it can do with our blood pressure, but others think that it has to do with stimulus of the vagus nerve, which is a big part of our nervous system and its response. But regardless of if we're not 100% on the mechanics of it, the evidence on how it can be very effective at helping people has been clear through multiple studies. Now, box breathing is one that we've already practiced because of the little toys I handed out. But box breathing also has another term that you might hear sometimes, which is going to be tactical breathing. And this is actually evidence-based and taught in the US military and in multiple law enforcement circles as a way to be able to help people focus on and manage their own stresses and anxieties, especially when they're in different stressful environments that they may not have a lot of control. And so these are things that Uncle Sam is very big on evidence-based practice. They're not going to start teaching and rolling it out to a bunch of people unless it's been shown to be effective because they try to save money on stuff. And so just the fact that this is something that they take time to teach people for that self-regulation is something that I found powerful myself. Now, we've practiced this one already, but like other exercises, it'll help reduce stress and anxiety. It can improve our focus and clarity, and it can also help us with emotional self-regulation. Now, I have been told, though, box breathing is really busy. And let me get out from in front of the camera, right? But when it comes to having to track counting up to 4, holding for 4, going down for 4, adding the finger and others, for a lot of people trying to find a calm state of mind, that can sometimes be really busy and hard to do. So what I have heard many people be successful with when they might have struggled with other exercises is actually extended exhalation. Now, the idea here is that when you are exhaling for longer than you are inhaling, so a lot of the stress that we get and a lot of the stuff with our breath actually doesn't come from the air coming in. A lot of the ways that we help ourselves is that exhaling out. Because our body, as we move, muscles do its thing, and homeostasis and just our metabolism happens, we develop carbon dioxide, and that exhaling of it is literally getting rid of what can build up to be a toxic gas in our bodies. So being able to exhale longer than we're inhaling gets rid of a lot of that CO2 and creates that state of relaxation. Now, in particular, I've been told that trying to exhale like you're trying to fog up the window in winter, right? That's going to be the way that you're really relaxing the jaw, your neck, and your upper chest as we're doing it. And so if people wouldn't mind joining me for just 2 quick extended exhalations, I'm going to go ahead and go in for 4 and out for 6. But again, as long as you're exhaling longer than it's coming in, you're good. But in, out. One more. In and out. Thank you. Now, as we've seen, breathing exercises activate our relaxation responses, and they allow us to slow that heart rate and feel that connection. And something I'm a particular fan of working with, so in my work with children in particular, teaching some of these ideas of when you're about to flip your lid, this is helpful for kids. I've had kids as young as 5 years old, after I've explained things, be able to say, hey, I'm about to flip my lid. And just saying that allows them to recognize it, bring things back online, and choose to do something else before they hit their friend, right? When it comes to the hand breathing that we're going to get to next, hand breathing is helpful because it gives somebody something to look at, touch, and interact with. And for pretty much all of us, like, you may not always have the little figures I handed out to you with you, but most of us take our hands everywhere we go, right? And so you're going to be equipped to do this. And so having somebody hold their hand out, and we take a finger and we start on one side. As we're moving up towards the tip of the finger, we inhale. Down we exhale. In. Last finger. This one, without the counting and a lot of the stuff in your head, just brings it into that physical, tactile sensations. Right? And oftentimes, one of the most effective strategies I've found for getting out of my own head is to go ahead and get into the world around me. And the most effective way that I've found to get into the world around me is to get myself into my senses, because that's really the way that we interact with our world. And I don't know about you guys, but especially with some of my work through NAMI, I realized that a lot of the challenges and the demons we carry with us day to day are ones that are in our own head. And oftentimes finding a way to put names to them, to quiet things, to be able to help with that focus, that's a lot of the strategies of that intentional living, to get out of where we are here and into the people and places around us. Now, this is a grounding exercise that a lot of people may have already seen before, but things that it invites you to do is to intentionally get into those senses. So when we talk about 5 things you can see, if you just scan the room, you're taking in tons of information. But being able to actually specifically name them, when you can say that I end up seeing a round wall clock, when I end up seeing a TV screen in the corner, a world map, my brain labels them. And the fact that I bring it from just a visual sensation into I have a label and a name for it helps to make me more present and aware of it on an intentional level. Then you go down from 5, seeing various others. There can be things that you can touch. From touch, things that you hear. Then we get into what are the things that we can smell. And finally, I don't necessarily want people bringing things in the room, but when we get to things that you can taste, if it's not practical while standing in line at the bank to smell something, when we can really stop and intentionally bring that up in our mind, really feel what something tastes like or smell something, even if it's not right there, it may not be as good as getting present with an object that's with you, but it engages a lot of the same centers in the brain and can really help connect things. Now, then, from this idea of getting into our senses, what we want to be aware of for the benefits of it are not only the assistance in managing our anxiety, but that attention to the present moment can be really easy to miss. I got a person that I work with, and she is absolutely infuriating in the best possible way. So she's a 9-year-old girl who experiences a couple intellectual and developmental disabilities, and for her, she has to stop and smell the roses, right? Just every single time we're passing by a flower or anything else that is bright and colorful, just she has to stop. She has to engage with it because it is beautiful, it smells good, and it takes forever to get anywhere. because you're stopping for every single thing. But it's also a good reminder and prompt that here she is wandering through her day, being amazed and finding joy in the flowers that I walk past without noticing most days out of the week. And so finding that way to have the balance, maybe not be distracted by the things around you all the time, but being able to still remember to stop and notice that there are flowers there and engage with them. From grounding, I next want to talk to us a bit about perceptions. All right. I think both of them are going to be a bit disappointed. Reality is that one person's perspective can be very different from somebody else's, and that two perspectives can be right at the exact same time, even if they disagree with each other. Both of them have what the other one desperately wanted. One person has that boat off the island, the other one has land, right? Neither one realizes how grateful, how lucky they are with their own situation. They may not necessarily realize how unlucky they both are together. These perceptions, the perspectives we have, something that I think is powerful when we talk about spirituality and people, but also hard, is that each one of us is a unique and separate individual. Now, what's wonderful about that is we all get to be unique, special individuals with our own perspectives, life experiences, and things that are uniquely us. But what that also means is that comes at a separation from other people. Because I stop, I stop where you begin, is kind of how I think about that. And so that separation we have, we're never going to have the exact same perception and perspectives of the people around us because of the differences in our different life experiences. And so things we want to think about that contribute to how we perceive the world. How did we even develop the values and beliefs that we have in the first place? Well, what we first want to acknowledge is a lot of this stuff can come from our culture, our families, and the people around us. And I want to take a second to acknowledge culture as well, because not only does everybody have culture, but all of us belong to multiple cultures. All right, just seeing my intro up there. I am a Bush Alaskan, I am a veteran, I am a Catholic, I'm a huge nerd. All right, all of these are different cultures that I belong to, and they have different beliefs, different norms, different practices that happen within them. And those very much shape the way I perceive the world. They also shape the way I don't perceive the world, because perspectives also come with blind spots. And the unfortunate reality with blind spots is you can't see your own blind spots. Yeah, that's why we call them blind spots, not the hard to see spots. And that really necessitates for us listening to people. Actually, the people who have connected with the different lessons of previous masters in different ages of studying and learning. You have to try to learn and check your perspective with those of people other than yourself, because that's how you might be able to become aware of those blind spots you're not going to see on your own. Now, from that being shaped by our families and culture, our emotional state can be powerful. If you're in a crappy mood, chances are it's really easy to remember other times you were in crappy moods. If you're having a really great day, you're probably remembering a whole bunch of happy things and positive associations, because our current emotional state even connects to our memory, in which things are easier to recall. When we see here just our general personality, people can differ on those, but I've also learned that personalities can change throughout a person's lifetime. They're not quite as immutable as many people have thought in the past. And when we see here things for media and the environment, many of us have heard the phrase that you are what you eat. I like to expand that out. We are what we consume. Now that can be through the movies we watch, through the people that we listen to, where we get our news. It can be the food that we eat. It's the air we put into our bodies. It's also very much the people that we share our lives with, right? These are the things that kind of shape a lot of who we are. And so by being intentional of the stuff that we engage with, that's another big way that we can really check our own perception. Now, a powerful story that I was raised with that I'm sure many here might have heard is the story of the two wolves. That inside every single one of us, we have one wolf who's patient. They are kind, they are good to the people and things around them. We also have a wolf that is angry, it is hurt, and it lashes out at those around them. And each of us has these two wolves fighting inside of them every day. The question comes to which one is ultimately going to win, and the answer is whichever one we choose to feed. And so when we look at this media, the stuff we surround ourselves with, I encourage you to be aware of these and how they impact you and intentionally feed the good wolf. Now that we have these ideas of what is our perception, are we in a state of mind where we can actually choose our actions? Here would be another model from the military and from law enforcement I want to introduce people to, but the idea of the OODA loop. Now, the OODA loop is an acronym that stands for Observe, Orient, Decide, and Act. Now, the common wisdom about this, as it's been applied in different situations, is whoever goes through it the most completely, the quickest, and most efficiently will be the one who's most successful in a given situation. Now, we'll get into them a little more in depth in subsequent slides, but the short version is taking in everything that's going around inside and outside, putting it into context for what that means, and then intentionally making a choice about what you're going to do about it and doing that thing. Now, the benefits of our OODA loop is it improves our overall situational awareness, and it also helps to support that calm and thoughtful response, because instead of reacting, we're intentionally responding and making that choice. So first part to be aware of. A big trap I find people get into on the first part of observing is that all of us have eyes that face outward. And so it's easier for us to look at what other people are doing, their actions, behavior, before we evaluate ourselves. But we need to start first by knowing ourselves. That's where true wisdom comes from. What is your perspective? What are your blind spots? What are your buttons and triggers? How do you respond to the things going on around you? Because how can you live your life intentionally if you don't even know how you're going to react? Then, from knowing yourself, observe others. Now, other people are not us. They have different experiences, thoughts, perspectives, and beliefs, but human beings have a tremendous amount in common. And so when we start from knowing ourselves and then exercising empathy and figuring out other people's perspectives, it may not be perfect, but it gets us a lot closer to understanding maybe where someone's coming from and what they could be feeling. We also want to observe the environment as they are, see with our eyes. And I'm going to steal a line actually from Ted Lasso, of all places, a great TV show. All right, but be curious, not judgmental. When we judge things, good, bad, it's terminating thought. We've already decided that we know about it, and we've already figured out which box we're putting it into. But when we approach people and things with curiosity, wondering why they're happening, what will happen if I have this particular action, that is a much healthier way to interact with our worlds. Then, from observing, we want to orient. What does this mean in context? Learn, study. This is a good way that we can try to understand how our actions interact with the world we find ourselves in. We also want to realize that the best indicator of future actions is going to be previous actions, right? Just what worked in the past, probably work again in the future. What someone's done in the past, probably they'll do again. But we also got to have the humility that that's not perfect. Every person in this room has been surprised by something that didn't happen the way that you thought it would, right? And we also got to acknowledge that life gets about, that we can have the best of intentions, the best of plans. We can wake up and be having the best day where we made every single choice correctly, and things could still go sideways, right? Because that's the life we live. And so acknowledging with that humility and acknowledging that you will make mistakes. And that success in life is not about not making mistakes at all. That is someone who is afraid to engage with their world if they're never willing to screw up. Instead, success comes from people who make different mistakes today than we made yesterday. And that should be the focus. Now, the decide and act part, a lot of people get caught up on what is the right choice. They get that decision paralysis, and instead for it, all right, make a decision. You may get it wrong, is better to make a decision, take action, be wrong, learn from that mistake and try again, than just be spinning your wheels without ever making that first decision and trying. Sometimes you gotta throw it at the wall and see if it sticks. And so make that choice, take the action and ask yourself, did it get it closer to what you were trying to do or further away? And then use the results of that to inform your choices going forward. Because it's an OODA loop. The intent is that it keeps going, perpetual cycle. And then a final part I want to leave people with is an idea about how we communicate with each other. Now up here is just a basic schematic of a communication model, but very simply, people don't think in words and full sentences like I'm talking to you right now. We think in ideas and sensations and in concepts, and people have different ways of doing that. And so when I'm trying to communicate to people, I need to think about what are the tools you guys have to understand me, right? And then I need to think about how I can use those tools in communication. Now I'm going to give people kind of two quick examples of how this can break down. First one is if I look at all of you and I say, get to it. How do you respond?
What?
Get to it.
Get to what?
Good. Yeah, well, and actually that is who are you? But that's who are you in Yupik. And what we're seeing here is that if I'm the sender, I'm encoding in Yupik, you don't speak Yupik, you don't have the tools to decode what I said, you don't understand me, right? So that's kind of the obvious encoding and decoding issues if we use different language. But it can also come into play in many other areas. Another one I'll do real quick, actually looking around the room, and maybe we'll have 3 people who will get this. But if I told you that a large part of how I figure out how to live my life comes from asking myself the question, what would Uncle Iroh do? Anybody know who Uncle Iroh is? An amazing mentor from a very influential cartoon called Avatar: The Last Airbender. All right, yeah, there we go. Now we got some chuckles in that memory. And he is an amazing role model. But if you've never seen the show, you're not going to get the reference, and so I wasn't a very good communicator. I also got to realize you guys will make different connections than I might. If I use the phrase, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, some here probably finish the psalm, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. But I also grew up in the 90s. I take a look at my life and realize there's nothing left. Gangster's paradise, Coolio. Kind of important when you're talking to people and you make a reference then to know which connection they're going to be making. And so realize that just because you said something doesn't mean that's how it was heard, all right? And it's important for us to try to match the way we communicate with people with the tools they have to understand, and make sure to check for feedback, because it's so easy to hear something someone didn't mean to say or to miss something they did. That communication, that reception is really important to living intentionally with people in your life. Now, from here, thank you guys. I tried to cover a lot because these are subjects I'm passionate of. But at this point, I did get to my time, and I've been told that there would be a question and answer that comes in. Right? But thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Would you be willing to email me that deck?
Yep, absolutely, and probably the easiest way if I get that to you and you can get it to anybody who needs it. All right, then yeah, absolutely, you guys are welcome to it.
What deck?
It's the slideshow presentation.
Sorry, I've never heard it called a deck. Thank
Oh
you.
yeah, no, absolutely, and actually I saw you're taking pictures of slides too, that might be a good way to get it. So after I get things to Anne, we can just email her.
I just wanted to make a comment that I have come to believe that there is no way I can know what's inside you unless I ask you. And then we're going to have a conversation, because you may not know what I'm interested in knowing. And so it's kind of a dance. But I've become very, very humble not to judge people by what anything they're doing, saying, being at the time, because that doesn't give me enough information until I say, who are who, and in many different ways, but, to me, that's one of the most important parts, the humility part of connecting.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll say here and then here.
Oh, I think she might have had her hand up first, Laura.
No, it was Bud.
Oh.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay, okay.
Let them
I'm
do
a kinesthetic type person and a visual artistic person. What's the best grounding exercise for me?
Yeah, so those can be great questions. The big one I'm going to say is experiment.
Okay.
One I've found is really successful with some people when it comes to visual and kinesthetic, though, is those breathing spheres. You know, you inhale and it gets big, you exhale and you move your hands and it gets
Okay.
small. And that gives you those twofold of that like kinesthetic sensation, and you can visually see it expand and contract.
Okay, thank you, that's
But-
helpful.
Yeah, awesome. And again, just like experiment with them. I also like giving people excuses to buy toys. Right? And then I would say bud and then here and there. Go ahead.
You mentioned you work as a recipient in the PTS group setting. Would you elaborate a little bit on what you found back then that was useful that you now tend to employ with other people? If that's easy.
Yeah, and that's a big question.
Sure.
Right? So the first one I'll do for clarification is I experience complex PTSD. So it's less of like the acute flashbacks,
Right.
and it's more of just like it's a lot of it for me is the perception that I'm not safe from the people around me because of a lot of internalized shame and other things that really happened to me through a traumatic childhood. And with those, that I often feel is that I have to self-regulate the people around me. So if someone's upset, that's my fault and I need to fix it. And so having this allows me to take that breath and identify their feelings are not my feelings. They're allowed to be upset and it's not my fault. And just because somebody's feeling something doesn't mean that I have to fix it. Maybe the best thing for me to do is to be present with them in that feeling rather than try to control it. But that took at least 15 years of me like working through with group and other people to be able to develop those tools to
Nice.
identify when I'm doing it and respond differently. Yeah, and so I hope that helped with the question.
That's nice, thank you.
Awesome. And I saw some hands over here.
I just got some shoulder issues, sorry.
Oh, yeah, that'll be fine.
Oh, I found your presentation very validating. I'm an expressive arts therapist, so just really validating for what I do. And I guess just a comment or share in the spirit of sharing. We look at experience, how we experience life, how we express ourselves on a sensory level, you know, like we
Could you pass it?
sensory and affective, and that's like your difference between responding and reacting, and then on the cognitive level, and all the things that you presented are real. I find them really helps to help people get out of the cognitive level, notice how what their emotional state is on the affective level, and what their bodies are telling them on the sensory level. You know, and I wanted to, if I may, you know, respond to the lady who was talking about visual and kinesthetic. I love the, you know, I have stayed away from box breathing because we're in the cognitive level of counting. But I love what you did first time I, you know, done that, or I didn't think of it, is tracing that box, but have a rectangular box, so your inhale is on the short side and your exhale is on the long. I'm gonna use that tomorrow.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
This is something you do with people. These little boxes I buy in bulk and you can easily get
They're
them.
wonderful. And so I've also, for the visual side, you know, I will have people make, you know, you probably do that too, little sensory objects, but sometimes on old pieces of corrugated board, small enough for your pocket, so you can make glue stuff on or draw stuff, and then when you're touching it. But I'm gonna add the tracing, to it as well.
Well,
Okay,
we'll
so
do
thank you.
Quick plug for those as well. So like here I got one on the back of my phone, but they make textured breathing stickers. The star happens to be my preference here, but same thing. You're
Oh.
breathing in and tracing it, breathing out. Visual tactile thing, and they come with different textures. So if you don't like the way that this rough one feels, you can find others that are kind of more up your alley.
Oh, that's good to know. I didn't know about that. What breathing stickers?
Yeah, breathing stickers.
Okay, great.
Very cool.
Awesome. Yes.
I have a comment and a question. I'm very kinesthetic. I think I wrote a book on it, but I love the technique you took us through the breathing and then breathing out. Not only was it really good, it helped me be more aware of my breath, but it really helped me be present. And that it was actually so soothing to just trace my fingers. That was a really cool experience. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
My question, you indicated that you had complex post-traumatic stress, and I'm curious, living in a bush village, were you, like, how did you get there, and how much difficult, because my daughter's taught in the bush for 10 years, and there's been some really interesting dichotomy between the different perceptions in the village with people that come into the village. And then having that experience of trauma there, I don't know if you want to speak any more about that in detail, but then how did you transition? It seems like that would be really hard to make a transition in the life in the bush to military. Like, if you were already trauma, did you have trauma from the military? Like, how did you navigate that?
So thank you,
It's
and
a
I'll
small
try to
question.
try to do the best I can for them. So experiences in the bush. So my parents moved to Dillingham when I was about 4 years old from Antioch. So I pretty much even Antioch's not big, right? So I pretty much was raised in the bush. So I don't really have much to compare it to, like not being in the bush and then coming there. I just have the experience from the bush out. Without details for trauma growing up, is that my mom worked at the domestic violence sexual assault victims advocacy shelter that I spent from the ages of about 6 to 16 either in or working at. And so I had a lot of vicarious trauma because pretty much by definition I was spending my time with people who had been victims of some pretty atrocious violence. I myself was the victim of some peer violence growing up pretty consistently. And it's also hard in that setting because I'm a man. And when you're a boy to a man raised in a DVSA shelter, you see the results of the harm that men cause. And there can also be a lot of internalized shame that comes with that, particularly when then I transitioned into the military and some of the hyper-masculinity that I ran into within that context. But the military was probably the best thing I could have done to deal with trauma. Like, I know that sounds counterintuitive for a lot of people, but I mean, I got paid on the 1st and the 15th. I knew where all my meals were coming from. I always had a rack roof over my head, and just the amount of structure and consistency that the military provided me was something that not only I really thrived within the military, but a lot of my journey being a veteran out of the military is how can I create that structure for myself because I need it.
Well, I'm told that structure after trauma helps reset the nervous system, so that actually probably was a good choice for you, but I just wondered, with the whole masculine thing, I'm just curious how you...
No, those were hard, but by far the biggest thing that helped me get over things was teaching preschool. I had to be patient, I had to be kind, I had to blow bubbles, I had to take a breath, think about what I was going to say before I did it. All the stuff I talked about, I had to do it for at least 8 hours a day, every single day for years. And doing that was probably the best possible thing I could have done for my mental health recovery.
So going back to the latter part of your talk on communications and the necessity of that feedback loop, is absolutely critical. And a couple of examples that I've got real quick of that. My oldest daughter, Joey, went to a college called Beloit. And every year when the freshman class comes in, they develop this thing called the list, the mindset list. And it is designed for the professors to understand the mindset of the incoming class. And one that I'll always remember for the list that Joey had was moonwalk is a Michael Jackson dance step, not Neil Armstrong's one step. And in my work environment, if ever I got something miscommunicated or wonky in what I was thinking versus what reality was, I would go in the infamous words of Emily Latella, never mind. And I did that for years. And then one day I had the courage to ask, does anybody understand that reference? Nobody understood it. And I had to explain it to them.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And they can. I had an awkward one with a support recipient recently, but we were getting done on a phone call, and I was trying to tell her that I'll call her later. And so I said, oh yeah, it's okay, I'll give you a ring. And she got very offended and scandalized very quickly. And she's like, you can't do that, you're engaged. And I'm like, oh yeah, the ring on the phone, a little archaic these days.
Yeah, the ring. I get it.
Mhm, yeah.
Thank you very much for learning, wearing what you're talking about in present time and articulating it clearly and being able to say whence it came, learning from children, learning from very broadly opposite cultures and things going on, and putting that all into your personal mix and sharing it with us. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
See, I know how to pick them.
You do.
Yeah, you did
Awesome,
well.
man.